This is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culchion Ford. Bird Culchion Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoak and Grayson Grundhoefer.
And welcome into the Bearcast on this Tuesday, October the 29th, 2024. I'm Craig Smoak, joined as always by Grayson Grundhoefer. Got Garrett Ross behind the scenes as well. And we are live on this Tuesday at 11 a.m. on the Baylor Athletics on Sikkim 365 YouTube page. To be specific, there is a Baylor Athletics page. That's the official. There's the Baylor Athletics on Sikkim 365 page. That's us. And that's where you're watching us live or maybe catching us after the fact. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And for the next hour or so, we're going to be talking all things Baylor football as the Bears are rolling in off of another win, this time against Oklahoma State, as they got the job done this past Saturday, 38-28 at McLean Stadium, to reset the counter to 0 in a lot of different instances, whether it be back-to-back Big 12 wins, whether it be a win at McLean Stadium, a win at McLean Stadium versus a Big 12 team. I mean, on and on, there are some new benchmarks or some old benchmarks that are being met once again and some losing streaks that are subsiding, and that is refreshing and nice to talk about after about 2 years of talking about said streaks. So we got some winning to talk about today, the second show in a row, which that's the first time this has happened in 2 years. So another one of those little streaks that we'll be talking about. But 38-28, Grayson, we're going to dive deep into this one. Garrett Ross behind the scenes. Not sure if I mentioned you already. Just want to make sure that I do. But another win and another positive show to host here. And I, for one, am thankful for that because Lord knows we've had our fair share of bad results to talk about for the better part of 2 years. So this is nice and new and yet familiar, and for some people unexpected, and just interesting is another word to use. Whereas it was kind of like, how do we keep kind of talking about this week after week if they don't break through? But these last couple weeks they broke through, and that was certainly the case again this week.
It definitely was, and this was just such a great opportunity for Baylor to kind of build on the momentum that they've been gaining. I mean, the Texas Tech win was huge. I mean, for a lot of obvious reasons, kind of got the season back on track, allowed you to look forward, right, and truly try to take advantage of a schedule that clearly is turned over. I mean, as we progress through the season and you start looking at who they lost to, it's like, man, they had a gauntlet to start the year. I mean, Colorado, BYU, and Iowa State are all really good, and I know Utah's fallen off, but the Utah team Baylor had to play was not the team that we're seeing on Saturdays now. So, yeah, Baylor's taking advantage of things right now. They're getting opportunities to play teams that I think are a little more comparable, and they're playing really well. And I think for the fan base and for the program, this was a huge win on Saturday. They have another one coming up, another opportunity to break what has been a really long streak as well. So just really trying to go through that checklist, right, of just checking off some things they haven't done in recent memory and try to get this program and just get things kind of back on track.
Yeah, I say now the one streak that's really head and shoulders above all is you can say, well, when's the last time they won 3 in a row? Well, that's not the one I'm referring to, but the answer there is the last time they won 2 in a row, obviously, because you had to win 3 in a row. So it goes back to that same stretch of you beat Tech in Lubbock, and then you beat Oklahoma, and would you beat like Kansas or something after that? There was 3 in a row.
Yeah, 3 in a row right before the collapse.
Yeah, and then everything shifted for the worse, and you had just the comedy of errors and just horrible losses and like agonizing defeats and blowouts and close losses and all these different things for 2 years. So this is we're revisiting that still because that's when the last time all these things happened was that same time period. So for at least another week, we're back at like, when's the last time this happened? The same time the back-to-back happened.
Right.
And the last time they won a Big 12 game.
And that Kansas win, that was the last Big 12 home win that they've had. I mean, for Baylor fans, on Saturday was the first time they've left the stadium with a win in a conference game since Kansas in 2022. It's pretty crazy to think about it like that, but it is what it is. It has been the reality. And so they broke that streak, have more opportunities to go. But I will say, I felt like the atmosphere in McLean Stadium was really good, but I also think there were a lot of nerves. I mean, especially with the way the game was going through the first half and then kind of later on in the game, there's clearly some anxiety building up, I think, amongst fans, just kind of like, oh no, is this going to fall apart? But obviously Baylor didn't allow that to happen.
Yeah, I didn't really have that feeling myself. I felt pretty confident about them winning going into this one, and dang near hit right on the mark as far as the prediction went. I was off by, I think, like 4 points in the overall total, but I felt pretty confident throughout the week. I can see why during the course of that game there were some moments where it started to shift and you go, uh-oh, which Baylor team is going to go through this door and show up on the other side of it? Is it going to be the team that can't hold on to a lead, or is it the team that can actually break through that mold and build on the lead? And for the first time in a long time, we saw this team go and grab victory and not allow the jaws of defeat to even enter the equation with some huge answers when they needed them most. But revisiting this, the last time they won 3 games in a row was the stretch where they beat Kansas at home, and then they beat Texas Tech and Oklahoma back-to-back. And that was the last 3-game winning streak. That was back this same time period, because what happened after that Oklahoma win, which was that 3rd win in a row, was then you had the K-State loss, which that was the game that turned the whole situation on its head, really, these past couple of seasons. So that's where we've kind of come full circle back to, where they're trying to get back to some of those marks. So they've won a home game, they've won a road game, they've won a close game, they've won a blowout game, they've done a lot of things. So that leads me to now, which is the streak now that's in the forefront, which is not winning 3 in a row, even though we've mentioned that, and that's what they're entering again. It's beating TCU. That's the streak that needs to end this week, is beating TCU. And I would argue, of all the streaks that still do remain, or all the little things like that, this is the biggest one and the clearest hurdle to have to pass by far for this football program, because TCU has, let's face it, owned this rivalry for the better part of a decade. They're honoring the 2013 and 14 teams. The last time, outside of the 1 year that Matt Rule's team beat TCU, the last time Baylor has won this series, other than that one time, was the 2014 team. So that's how long it's been, that 10 years later, they're being honored. And there's been 1 win in this series, even though they play yearly in that entire time. And so that's the streak this week. Forget 3 in a row. Forget whatever Big 12 combination you want to talk about. They need to beat TCU, and it wouldn't matter if they were 4-4 like they are now, or if they were 0-8. They just simply need to beat the Frogs.
Right, and let's also be clear about it. Those 3 wins you're talking about, 2013, 2014, and 2019, were all narrow, very narrow wins, like all-time type games, all 3 of them. And so it's pretty crazy to see how much TCU has dominated this series. They've won 8 of the last 9. So, I mean, it's been pretty dominant. That 2019 game, I mean, Baylor got really lucky to get out of there, made a 53-yard field goal to tie it, send it to overtime, and then obviously won in triple overtime. But yeah, they have a lot to kind of get back to, and that series is one where you need to start winning that one for recruiting battles, for the program. I mean, that's your biggest rival. So yeah, it's very important.
And Lord knows they should have a couple of wins in that time frame. The fire drill, field goal, walk-off a couple years back, like that was a game that Baylor should have won. But there's a lot of these games.
The Jalen Rager game in 2018.
Yeah, the low-scoring game where you give up 2 plays the entire day, and they're both touchdowns to Jalen Rager, and you lose a low-scoring game. But TCU's found every way to win this game, and they've won in every imaginable fashion, basically. They've won multiple blowouts. They've won multiple close games. They've won just regular old games. They've won important games, games where nobody really cares about either team. They've won all of them with the one exception coming during the 2021 season. So it's just flat out time to beat TCU, and it's overdue to beat TCU. And so that's, I think, the thing you're eyeing this week. Now, that's for us to talk about. Players can't be sitting there hyperventilating, but we got to beat TCU and we got to win 3 in a row. Like, that's the stuff that we talk about, and it's the job of the coaches and players to just focus on the one at a time and just the pure football of it. But yeah, that's the theme to me is just it's time, man. If there was a time to beat them, they are walking in off of a win, but they got a little bit of a limp to them this season, as does Baylor, and they're certainly there for the taking, but so is Baylor. So this is going to be like last week and the week before. It's a complete coin flip like most games in the Big 12, and it's going to come down to execution and who makes the best plays, the smartest plays, and plays the cleanest game. And I think Baylor won a bunch of those categories last weekend. So let's get into it with Oklahoma State so that we can talk about some of this other stuff later on. And let's cover the Cowboys and kind of what went down to get to where we are right now. The Bears now 4-4 on the year. From 2-4 a little less than a month ago to now back to 500. 2-3 in the conference after an 0-3 start. So it's amazing just what a couple of wins will do for you, just in terms of changing the perception and changing the temperature in the room, but just changing what's remaining out there for you, because now you can have the conversations of, is a bowl game possible? Like, can they win 2 out of 4? Now, again, they've got to take it one game at a time, and the last thing you can do is start looking ahead when there's a team that's beaten you 9 out of the last 10 years sitting right in front of you. But, Grayson, there are some things that are possible now that we were definitely not talking about a couple of weeks ago, and so this is a very interesting final stretch that begins this weekend.
It really is. I mean, I kind of mentioned it when we talked about the Texas Tech game. I felt like that game was the one they had to win, right? If you wanted to get on a streak to end the year, if you wanted to make a bowl game, you had to win that game. They won that one, and now, I mean, it's pretty crazy to think about, but you look at the rest of their schedule, I mean, they might be the underdog once, maybe the West Virginia game. Outside of that, they're probably going to be the favorite.
The West
rest
Virginia,
of these
they
games.
just fired their defensive coordinator this morning.
Right. So really, I mean, if Baylor wins this game and then you have a bye week and let's say West Virginia loses Cincy, there's a chance you're favored on the road there as well. So it's all in front of them for them to win a few more games before the end of the season, make a bowl game, maybe even comfortably make a bowl game. But we'll see on that. Obviously, a long way to go still, but there are some really, really nice things in front of them. I will also say this, though. We'll get into it more when we preview TCU, but TCU has a very similar path. Yeah. You look at the rest of their schedule. If they win this game, they could be an 8 or a 9 win team as well. So it's kind of an interesting situation where this is kind of the springboard game to kind of moving one of these programs into a point where, you know, maybe they finish in the top 5 in the Big 12 standings.
Yeah, whoever wins this game is going to be sitting pretty with 3 games to go. So it's an important one for a lot of different reasons, but it does have a little bit extra to it because TCU squeaked out a win last week. Quite frankly, didn't really have any business winning that game. Tech choked that away. But to TCU's credit, they went and won it. But because they won and because Baylor's now won a couple in a row, there's some meat besides just the rivalry and the general things to this of like, yeah, bowl games and bowl positioning and all that. But again, that's for us to talk about. For the players and coaches, they just need to keep doing whatever they've been doing the last couple of weeks and focus on one game at a time. But all right, how did we get here? 38-28 Oklahoma State. We'll riff through a lot of these drives because there's a lot of scoring and whatnot, but Baylor got the ball to start the game this past Saturday at home. A respectable crowd. It was hot, kind of a steamy day for late October. That's the thing that stands out to me is, man, it would be nice to get some chill in the air at this point. So we'll see if that happens with a couple of home games remaining, but I don't know at this stage. We're getting pretty deep into it, but it was a fine crowd. I think this weekend will really be a tell-all as far as, like, what kind of fan base does Baylor want to be? Right. Like, they want to be the spoiled, like, you better win 10 in a row or I'm not showing up. Or are you going to be like, hey, there's a little something, like, let's go support these guys? I would think this weekend with all of the old nods and tributes and the 2020 or 2013 and 14 teams being there and it being TCU and it being a blackout, I'd expect a festive atmosphere this weekend, especially because they've won a couple of games in a row. But, you know, if not, then I'm going to be talking different next week and be changing my tone a little bit because I have patience for now. But at some point, I think you keep winning, there needs to be some of that support showing up.
I agree 100%. I mean, going into this game, I know it's sunny, I know it's hot, but the fact of the matter is even when the game started, it wasn't completely filled in, the stadium. And so, yeah, I understand a lot of people in the concourse. I think the fans were really loud, and I felt like it was a really good environment. But I do think there's another level that the fan base could get to this weekend and needs to get to. I mean, frankly, if you're not going to get excited for this game, I don't know what game you're going to get excited for. I mean, there's so much going into it. I think Baylor's done a great job of making this a game that they kind of circled in the preseason and have put a lot into it. And you get a night game, which, again, makes there no excuse for the weather, really. Maybe there's rain, but, again, you got to be able to fight through those things. And I just think in general, the environment that Baylor is kind of putting together with the 2013, 2014 teams being honored, which a lot of Baylor fans obviously love, but then also a team that's playing really well right now against a team that can definitely beat, and your rival who Baylor hasn't beaten in a while. I mean, it makes this a very important one, I think, for the program, and one where, yeah, you're exactly right. The fans need to show up.
So Baylor opened this game with a 6-play drive that ended up turning over on downs as they got to the Oklahoma State 40, and the drive just stalls out. Incomplete pass on 4th down. They're trying to be aggressive early on. Like, that's cool, but 4th and 4 can't convert, and so you end up turning the ball over on downs. Oklahoma State will score right out of the gate. They turn that turnover on downs into a field goal as they get down to the Baylor 12-yard line within a big intentional grounding penalty on Alan Bowman, who actually played pretty well in this game, like didn't make a bunch of dumb throws, and he had some throws that you're just like, what are you throwing to? But he didn't turn the ball over and get like real bad, funky. If anything, it was more other areas like the defense, for example, that was Oklahoma State's big issue. At times it has been Alan Bowman. I don't think that was the case in this game. I thought he was actually pretty okay.
He was, and every time he threw the ball to Brendan Presley, that was a great idea for him. But I took away kind of on these first 2 drives for Baylor were 2 explosive plays in the pass game. Michael Trigg on the first drive, and then on the second drive, you had the 53-yarder to Hal Presley. So lots of good stuff kind of going on there, but the run game hadn't quite gotten on track yet. It was still 3-yard carry type things, but good job by the defense getting a stand, holding Oklahoma State to a field goal on that first drive.
Yeah, Michael Trigg had a big game on that first drive, but again, they ended up turning it over on downs around midfield or so. On that second drive, following the Oklahoma State opener, you mentioned Hal Presley, a big 53-yard catch. Had a bunch of different guys involved here and started to scrape away a little bit in the run game. Eventually, though, you end up with a 3rd and long, and that was after Dawson Pendergrass got dropped for a loss. And so you had 3rd and long, not able to get the first down as Sawyer Robertson kept it. So you settle for a short field goal from 30 yards out. Isaiah Hankins is good, so you're tied up at 3, and you're feeling okay about things. You'd force Oklahoma State to punt, so then you're really feeling good about things as they are unable to move the football whatsoever. Ollie Gordon just, getting his here and there throughout the day. Definitely frustrations boiling over by the end, but they pretty well contained him during the course of this game, and I think that they did a really nice job of just kind of corralling him and keeping him in check. So nice job by the defense. Had a big penalty, pass interference on this drive as well that really hurt Oklahoma State and put them in a 3rd and long situation to where they were forced to punt, pinned back at near their own goal line. So Baylor's offense gets on the board, defense gets another stop, but then bad interception by Sawyer Robertson just 3 plays into this drive, and Baylor turns the ball right back over. He was kind of off early on. He wasn't like super accurate, and so it took him a little while to kind of get into his groove, and this was an example of just kind of being off, I felt like, a little bit early on. And, a throw where you're in their territory and you're sitting pretty good, and just a couple plays into this drive, you turn the ball right back over, and that was one you're like, okay, it's not the kind of early mistake you can really afford in this game, but it's early enough that it's probably not going to kill you, but let's see what happens here. And, well, Baylor's defense would come up with a huge play as Sawyer puts them in a pickle with that interception because Oklahoma State starts their drive in their own territory. They get it all the way down into the red zone. And from the 12-yard line on 1st and 10, Ollie Gordon with a nice run all the way down. Looks like he's heading into the end zone, and Matt Jones comes up and pops him right on the football, gets it loose, and Steve Linton is there for a massive turnover as they get one back for their quarterback and limit the damage right there. Just a beautiful play by Matt Jones to get that football loose, and a big mistake by Ollie Gordon here. But heads up, Steve Linton gets the ball back, and the Bears with a big stop on defense to keep this game in check at 3-3 after the turnover.
Right, and you mentioned Sawyer Robertson early. He hit on some big plays, but yeah, he wasn't as accurate or as efficient as he had been. I also think in large part that kind of also turns to the run game was not as efficient as it had been either initially. But yeah, that throw, not a good one. I kind of was surprised they didn't run the ball there and then go to fourth down and then kind of see what you wanted to do, because they were in no man's land at the Oklahoma State 31. So you're kicking a pretty long field goal, which we know that has been pretty shaky this season. So maybe they felt like they had 2 downs. So I was a little surprised that Sawyer kind of made that decision. You kind of got to throw that football where either only your guy can catch it or no one can catch it, and he threw it kind of right to the Oklahoma State defender. But you're exactly right. I mean, this was such a great play by Matt Jones, and Matt is playing great football right now. Defensive Player of the Week in the Big 12 from his performance in this game. He was all over the field, and this play was kind of the beginning of that. I'll also mention the fact that Keaton Thomas, and Steve Linton immediately got into Ollie Gordon's face right after this, after Ollie had been talking kind of back and forth early on in this game, was a great sign. This is a team that we heard all offseason. They have an edge. They have a physicality to them. I think we really saw that on Saturday, in particular against Ollie Gordon, who was visibly frustrated by the fact that he couldn't get anything going on this day.
Yeah, he talks all the time anyways. Like, he's been doing that. That's nothing new for Ollie Gordon. He talks after every play, talks after every big hit and all that. But, yeah, he was clearly frazzled early on, and then as the game wore on and Baylor started to pull away, I mean, you saw the clip at the end of the game where he's being restrained because there's talking back and forth, and it's like a whole gang of Baylor players by the tunnel, and he's clearly upset and having to be restrained and emotional. And sometimes that's great. On Saturday, I don't think it was a good thing for Oklahoma State. So, yeah, he gets popped at the goal line, and a number of Baylor defenders there to make a play. And so that was huge, and they made it even more so, the impact of this turnover by how the offense then responded to it. Like, hey, you bailed us out with the interception by turning that into a turnover and keeping them off the scoreboard. We'll reward you with a 99-yard drive in 4 plays. Dawson Pendergrass rips off a massive 48-yard run, then incomplete pass, but Dawson Pendergrass, again, a 39-yard run, and then Sawyer Robertson to Hal Presley for 12 yards. Boom, 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 just like that. They take that goal line fumble and turn it into a touchdown to take a 10-3 lead. So this was 2 big runs from Pendergrass and a throw from Robertson to Presley that Hal made a good catch on. And, yeah, this was beautiful to see, and just a great drive and a great response and a great sign early on in this game of just kind of where this team was in terms of the fight we were going to see on Saturday.
Right. It took a minute 30, and Dawson Pendergrass, this was a great shift, I think, by the staff. Bryson Washington has been their best ball carrier. He's been their best running back. Make no mistake about that so far this year. But in this particular matchup, Dawson's patience was huge for this team. Bryson was doing a lot of get the carry, get the yards that you see, get 3, get 4, get 5 yards. Dawson was really waiting for his blocks to be set up and then hitting the gap really well. And this was a situation where Oklahoma State's linebackers are really bad. So you have to take advantage of their inability to maintain gap integrity. And that's what Dawson Pendergrass did. I was blown away by how well he played. And on this drive, obviously, we got to see a lot of that. He's got good bursts. Obviously, was a great football player out of high school. And you saw him kind of get gassed on that second run, which makes sense as he had just ran for, 80 yards on 2 plays. But he really set everything up. And then really nice to see Sawyer and Hal, their connection continue to grow. Perfect throw by Sawyer. Great grab by Hal.
Well, this game was going to be back and forth early because Oklahoma State would respond. 7 plays, 75 yards. You had a lot of Rodney Fields, just trying to scrape away something in the run game, but a lot of Brennan Presley, and he would cap off this drive, had a 12-yard reception, had a 3-yard reception, and then had the 33-yard touchdown reception to tie the game back up at 10. So an emphatic answer from Oklahoma State, who kind of took one on the chin after that big fumble and then gets scored on, 99-yard drive, and you're like, okay, well, you need a response. Well, they responded here and tied it back up, and this was just some of the Brennan Presley show, and we saw that all afternoon long, but this was just a drive where you got to be a little got to get a little taste of that, and he capped this one off.
And this was the play where he caught the ball 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and Chateau Reed had him just it should have been a tackle for loss.
Very frustrating play.
Very frustrating. How players, weren't able to rally to the football. Devin Bobby took a bad angle jumping inside of the block, and then Presley just ran down the sideline. I don't know how they weren't able to contain that or tackle him. Obviously, Presley is a very special player. He's about to break the Oklahoma State all-time receptions record, which Oklahoma State has had a lot of really good receivers, so he can obviously play, but this was not a play that Baylor should have allowed. It would have been 4th down from the Baylor 35-yard line. So Oklahoma State would have had to make a really tough decision to try to kick a really long field goal or go for it from there.
Yep, so it was a yakety sax moment on that Presley touchdown. And kind of one of those just kind of sunk your heart a little bit. You're like, oh gosh, that kind of tackling or lack of tackling, just an ugly play by the defense. But they would have, some good moments throughout the rest of the day. That was not one of them, though. And then we're in straight shootout territory. At least, the way this game started off, I was like, is this going to be low scoring? What are we going to see here? But pretty quickly got into shootout in the second quarter. Baylor responds. 6 plays, 73 yards, had a couple big penalties. Oklahoma State had a lot of penalties on Saturday, and they had a couple on this drive, including a pass interference when they were trying to go to Monterey Baldwin. So that helped out here. They had an offsides as well during this drive. So Oklahoma State really did – They really do hurt themselves in a lot of cases. They're also just not very good in general, but when you're bad and then you also do dumb things, that's a recipe for why you're 0-5 in the Big 12. But Baylor, a couple first down conversions here, a little bit of Bryson Washington, and eventually this is capped off with a short 1-yard pass. Sawyer Robertson to Matthew Kloffenstein, a 1-yard touchdown. The first of Kloffenstein's career, so the tight end getting involved, which hasn't been the case outside of Michael Trigg all that often this year, but the Bears with a nice 6-play, 73-yard drive in under 3 minutes, and it's 17-10, so the back and forth continues, and it will continue at least a little bit more during this first half.
Right, a nice drive here. Richard Reese with a 24-yard run during this drive as well, as he was pretty efficient too in the limited snaps that he got. But really nice design on the play. It was kind of a fake QB power type run, and then Sawyer just looked up, threw it right over to Matthew Kloffenstein, his first career touchdown, which is great to see, as he's kind of one of those guys that I think everyone's been waiting for to see him get on the field more, and obviously with Trigg there, it's kind of difficult, but I do think he's a guy that's kind of going to continue to grow into that role over the next year and then into the offseason as well.
So it's 17-10. They would trade punts back and forth, and then Oklahoma State gets the ball back with a little over 3 minutes, and they go on a 10-play, 64-yard drive to tie this game back up. Had a little bit of Ollie Gordon, but they convert on a 4th and 3. As Trent Hallen picks up 6 yards, resets the chains, and then it's a little bit more Brennan Presley. He picks up a couple first downs. Ollie Gordon gets in on the action. Then another big throw to Presley as he's doing everything. And then Ollie Gordon would get his, but not really, but sort of, he got his scores and his carries, but he didn't end up with 100 yards, not even close. And ultimately, his impact was just kind of in the middle, really, but he did get into the end zone here. He talked a little bit afterwards, imagine that. But in all seriousness, this was a big score because it was 17-10, and they score with 18 seconds left in the half. So they get the final laugh in the first half, tie it up at 17. They've got, I guess, a little bit of the momentum heading in as a result to the locker room. And so really after all that, it's like, well, we just start back over in the second half. I mean, that's basically what it was. It was starting back over at 0 for the most part because you're all even here. So that was kind of an ominous, you get the middle 8, right? You give up that touchdown, and so would have been nice to carry in a 17-10 lead, but it is what it is. And so you're tied up, and they get the ball to start the second half.
Right, so 2 things on these drives. On the initial drive for Baylor, with 3:54 left, Sawyer Robertson took that hit. And so then Nate Bennett came in on 3rd down. They weren't able to convert. A little scary, what was going to happen with Sawyer there, but he seemed fine.
Yeah, he was down for a while. He said afterwards that he just got the wind knocked out. He took a big hit. He had the wind knocked out. But, it was a scary situation, and DeQuan Finn's not healthy, so it's I don't know how he's hurt again, but he's hurt, and so, that needs to change just for the sake of, I mean, I just don't think you trust Nate Bennett to guide you for, the rest of the season if need be. Like, maybe he could uphold it for the most part, but, like, you'd like to have DeQuan Finn is my point
Right.
if you're going to, have to turn to somebody, but he wasn't available. So.
And Nate's a good passer. Like, he really is, but he's young. I mean, he's a true freshman. I mean, that is a lot to ask of him to go out and win you football games. So, yeah, it'd be nice to see DeQuan Finn healthy. I also want to mention on this drive, for the second home game in a row, because the BYU game included, a team ran a fake punt and got a first down. This happened on this drive on 4th and 3. It's pretty inexcusable. And the formation that Oklahoma State was in, how do you not call a timeout there?
No, that was the thing that bothered me the most.
Yeah, I don't understand how there's no timeout called there. When you're clearly out of formation, you're outnumbered. All you got to do is call a timeout, reset things, and you probably force Oklahoma State to just punt the football regularly. Instead, they don't, and it was pretty crazy because there was only 1:51 left. I know you want to preserve timeouts in case you get the ball back, but you got to get a stop, and instead it cost them 7 points.
Yeah, well, especially it's one thing if they just line up in a regular punt formation and they decide that, but they like clearly had, they like spread them out, and Baylor's just sitting there like, we don't know what we're doing, and nobody's calling timeout, and they just like, okay, well, I guess you must know what you're doing because otherwise your coach would be calling timeout because clearly they're running a trick play here. And no timeout, and then they just shoved their way forward for a first down pretty easily. That was strange that you didn't call a timeout there. So, yeah, that was what that big 4th down conversion was, and it led to them having several more plays and several more gains by Brennan Presley that eventually ended in the Ollie Gordon touchdown right before halftime. So, a 17-17. They would trade punts coming out of the second half. Oklahoma State, 3 and out. Baylor, 3 and out. Oklahoma State, 3 and out. And then finally, the game starts to hit the home stretch and go into, all right, who's going to try and pop up and win this thing? As Baylor, 3 plays, 57 yards on their second drive of the second half, had Sawyer Robertson with a nice first down run, Bryson Washington with a first down run, and then Sawyer Robertson to Ashton Hawkins for a 33-yard touchdown. It was an incredible catch by Hawkins, who definitely added a new moment to his highlight reel. And those are the types of things that I've been talking about. Like, that's the type of play. When I talk about playmakers and I talk about the talent and all of that, that's what I'm talking about. I've never doubted that Ashton Hawkins is talented, but they need Ashton Hawkins or Monterey Baldwin to go make that catch. He went and made that catch, and that has been all that I've talked about this entire time when I'm talking about the playmakers. Like, he went and made a play, whereas in week 2, he probably drops that pass or, the throw's a little bit off. But this game and these last couple weeks, like, receivers are going and grabbing the football and making the catch, and Sawyer's putting it where they can make the catch, and it's just working on all different levels. Sawyer's getting the time to make the throws, but, like, this is a catch that gets dropped or something in week 3, you know what I mean? But these last couple weeks, like, that's why, like, that's how you win.
Right.
You make that catch in that situation.
And last year there was no prayer of any receiver making that catch.
And that's
like,
that's been my point all along, is like, you got to make those types of plays. And so they made a play here, and it was one of many, and it's why they won this game.
Right, and they need to keep throwing these type of shots to Ashton Hawkins because he did this all spring, all fall. I mean, this is what he does. He goes up and makes contested catches. He made one here. This was a phenomenal catch, a phenomenal touchdown. Good throw by Sawyer, and this is what you're kind of alluding to. You need these types of throws to be 60-40 throws instead of 50-50 or 40-60. You know what I mean? Type balls. You need your receivers to come down with this, and so very exciting moment, big play, and they need more of this as they go forward.
Yeah, for sure. So they take the lead there. It's 24-17, big play by Hawkins, and then Oklahoma State, 9-play, 75-yard drive as they eventually have to kick the field goal. Logan Ward from 26 yards out. They had a 3rd and 6, and Baylor gets the stop, drop Ollie Gordon for a loss of 2 yards. And so Oklahoma State down there decides to kick the field goal in this situation from the Baylor 9, and it's good from 26. So they take the points, and this gives Baylor a 4-point lead. And this is where, hey, go make another play, and all of a sudden you're up 2 scores. And that's something that early on the season they would not have been able to do. In this game, they were able to do it. Not right away. They would get the ball back, 3 and out, and I'm like, okay, this is where Oklahoma State goes and, like, scores a touchdown to retake the lead. But instead, you did get the stop. Oklahoma State drove the ball a little bit, but you did force them eventually into the punt. So the defense, after a big sack by Trevin Maye, puts them in a 3rd and long. Bowman's got very low percentages on a 3rd and 25, so you got the big stop there, and you get pinned down. But you then go on what is going to be the drive that opens this game up for the most part. 8 plays, 95 yards after you get the stop, as Bryson Washington is the guy to start this drive. Sawyer Robertson hits Ashton Hawkins once again, and then another time for big gains. And then it's Dawson Pendergrass with a big run, but then they had the penalty right here that brought it back, the holding on Campbell Barrington. So you're like, oh, no, here we go. 1st and 20 at the Oak State 44. Bryson Washington just gets a 3-yard gain, but on 2nd and 17, Sawyer Robertson with the big run right up the middle, saw an opening, hit it, and took off, and narrowly avoided an angle with a defender, and kind of left himself open to get popped if it was about like a few inches closer. But fortunately, it was, I guess, just good enough angle-wise where he could just slip all the way through and past and get to the end zone. It was a massive run. Baylor takes a 2-score lead. And now you're feeling like, oh, dang, they're going to maybe win this game if they can just get a stop. But this was huge. And, man, this was a huge play, another playmaker-type play. And this was Sawyer Robertson showing off his wheels here as well. So 31-20, Baylor up by 2 scores.
Yeah, underrated athlete is what Sawyer is, and Sawyer took off here and just made a play. I mean, he really did. Saw an opening, took off, showed off the speed. This was great. The Dawson Pendergrass run that got called back by holding was a great cutback by him. It was truly an awesome run. It was an awesome day for Dawson. We'll probably talk about him at the end, but this was a great drive, and one of those that you kind of felt like, okay, now Baylor should go ahead and cruise the rest of the way. Didn't quite happen that way, but this was a really good statement drive, I felt like, for the offense.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen that way because Oklahoma State would respond. A very impressive response, 11 plays, 75 yards in a little over 4 minutes. Convert a big 4th down as Alan Bowman hits Alan Presley to reset the chains, and then to pick up a couple more first downs before Ollie Gordon, another short touchdown run, gets into the end zone. Then they get quite lucky in a way on the 2-point conversion as Brendan Presley ends up catching the ball on his back in the end zone. Is like he could do no wrong. But they convert. It makes it a situation where now you're only up 31-28. So this is a situation, too, where you've been here before. You haven't been able to close it out. It's money time. You need to go score and to go close this game out. And they didn't do that against Colorado. And they didn't do that in situations against BYU or other games that have been close here in the last couple years. But this time they did do it. They went out and won the game. They went out and made plays to win the game. 4 plays, 75 yards as Sawyer Robertson caps this one off after a nice pass to Josh Cameron with the handoff to his main man on the day, Dawson Pendergrass, who takes it 55 yards for the score. Gets the push from Sidney Fugar at the line that springs him, and he takes it the rest of the way once he gets some open daylight. And this was the big exclamation point. This makes it a 10-point game with 3 minutes remaining, and this was the end of the game because Oklahoma State was not going to be able to do enough. They would turn it over on downs after like a 9-play drive, just didn't have the muster to string together 2 scoring drives, much less 1. And so Baylor gets the big touchdown. They get the big stop on defense with the interception by LeVar Thornton on the prayer from Alan Bowman on 4th and 10, and then run out the clock, and that was your ball game. So Pendergrass with the exclamation point and the defense with the door shut slam, and boom, that's a big win, 38-28 for the Bears to move to 4-4 and 2-3 in Big 12 conference play.
Huge, and Josh Cameron's only reception on the day came on that 3rd and 3 that then set up the Dawson Pendergrass run. So good to see him step up in a key situation, and then Pendergrass just continued his excellent day. Defense gets a stop, and the Bears win. I mean, they win by 10 points, so not only do they win, they cover at home. And this was a statement game. I think the rushing attack going for 343 yards on 38 carries, phenomenal. Pendergrass 6 for 142. He was phenomenal in this game. He really put it all together. Sora Robertson in another game where his QBR is up over 88. He's just been so consistent, threw for another 3 touchdowns in this game. And just in general, this was one of those games where you look at the final, box score and you watch the game and you go, man, some of Baylor's best players really shined in this game, especially you look at defense. Matt Jones, Keaton Thomas, Steve Linton, they were always around the football in this game, making plays, creating havoc, tackles for loss, things like that. They really played well. And then the receivers, it's just, again, really spread out. You had, 8 guys with a reception in this game. Only Ashton Hawkins had more than 2 receptions. So really they spread it out nicely, hit on a bunch of explosive plays, and that really got them the win in this one.
Yes, it did. So just terrific to see so many guys stepping up and making plays. That's been a theme, and also great to see them win a close game. Great to see them win a game at home. Great to see them win back-to-back Big 12 games. Great to see them beat somebody of substance at home. I mean, on and on and on how big Saturday was. Great to see them, most of all, though, go freaking take a game and win it and go take that win. Let's hope Oklahoma State doesn't, go, Dawson Pendergrass break off a run and say, you're not going to have a chance to score because we're going to make it at 10 points. That's the thing that has been missing the last couple of years, and they drove the dagger in, so to speak, on Saturday when they had the opportunity to do so. So that's why Dave Aranda compared it to Colorado where, hey, we need one play, one more score, and we win this game, and you couldn't do it, and you left it into the hands of Colorado, and they went and took it. This time, you didn't allow Oklahoma State to have that opportunity. You went and took it, and it was a beautiful thing to see. So that sets up now this matchup with TCU, who is 5-3, a game better on the season, 3-2 in the Big 12, and they're coming off a thrilling 35-34 victory over Texas Tech in Fort Worth, a game that Texas Tech led by 13 until a little less than 10 minutes to go in this game, and TCU with 2 touchdowns in the final 9 minutes steal this one, quite frankly, 35-34. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean that, if you're a Texas Tech fan, you're like Joey McGuire's on the hot seat after this game and after the last couple of weeks because this is one you felt like you should have won. And TCU instead gets the huge victory. A big play by Eric McAllister puts them over the top, a long touchdown pass that was just a little matador whoop-de-whoop on the sideline. He takes off, and that determined the outcome right there. So if he gets tackled there for just a short gain, maybe that game ends up differently. But he took it the distance. It was a massive play and a massive win for TCU. So this sets up 5-3 versus 4-4. And 2 teams are pretty much right next to each other in the standings. So it's a matter of who's going to go up another level and who's going to maybe drop a little bit or just reverse places or what have you, or TCU builds on their lead. But these are, point being, 2 pretty even teams, which is pretty much every game in the Big 12 this season. So like every game in the Big 12, this is definitely winnable for the Bears. They're even somewhat favored by some places. But this is going to be one of those that I think comes down to just who makes, again, the most plays, the least amount of turnovers, the simple things, but the things that, especially in this very even league, are basically what dictates who wins these games week to week.
Right, and you look at TCU's schedule. They really haven't played much of substance this year, and the one really probably good team that they've played this year, SMU, they got routed in that game, and so it's kind of an interesting thing to look at. I don't know that we know who TCU is quite yet.
We do. They are a team that passes the ball most of the time, and it's all a matter of Josh Hoover is typically pretty good. Is he turning the ball over or not? Is he throwing picks or is he not? Because that's the big bugaboo. Because he can throw for 300, but he might throw a couple picks that are really costly.
Right, but I think it's more a conversation about how good are they defensively when they've played Utah, Houston, Central Florida, who's 3-4, Stanford. They just haven't played really good offenses. They haven't played really great defenses up to this point. So I think it's somewhere in the middle. I do agree with you. We know what they're good at. We know the things that they do well, but I think the question is, how well do they actually do those things? How much have they been challenged so far this year? They have won 2 games in a row, 2 very close games in 2 different ways as well. The Tech game more of a shootout, the Utah game just a slugfest. And so, I think it's an interesting conversation. They also lost to Houston by 11 points at home, which was a pretty intriguing result as well. But I think in general, coming into this game, we know they have an explosive passing offense when they don't turn the ball over. And Josh Hoover can absolutely make you pay. He torched Baylor last year for over 400 yards, completed 82% of his passes. So Baylor's secondary is going to have to take that step up if they're going to find a way to win this game. You mentioned the turnovers. TCU has 4 games this year where they've turned the ball over 3 or more times. It truly is in their DNA. They are going to give up the football. They're going to turn it over more games than not. It's just a question of how many times do they turn it over.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main thing is, I mentioned that's what they're good at is throwing the football around, but it's a matter of how effective is it based on the turnovers. So you had a game here where Josh Hoover throws for 344 and 3 TDs. But he also had a couple picks, and you win 35-34. If he doesn't throw the 2 picks, then maybe you win this game by 3 touchdowns, but those are the kind of things that have hurt them. They don't run the ball all that effectively. And basically what's happened now, Savion Williams, their great receiver, is a Wildcat quarterback. So you're going to see that against Baylor. He's a Wildcat quarterback. So that's been something we've seen a lot here lately. And he nearly ran for 100 yards last week. So that's what he's doing, in addition to also being a pretty good receiver, along with Erica McAllister, who came over from Boise State. So they got some weapons in the passing game. But again, can you turn Josh Hoover over is going to be really key in this one. And also, can you limit the running game and make it all about the passing game? Because they are having to throw Savion Williams at Wildcat, and we're seeing a little bit of Jeremy Payne, the youngster, and they're trying to get things going in the running game, but it's just been more about the pass for them for the majority of this year. And that's not necessarily a good thing for Baylor because they're good against the run. The pass is a little bit more of a question mark, especially when you saw what Brendan Presley was doing this weekend. You worry, is Eric McAllister or Savion Williams or Drake Dabney or whoever going to hit them and hurt them in the passing game as well. But you do have to be mindful of the running game from the standpoint of the Wildcat and and then just being a little tricky on that side. Right,
and I mean, this is really an interesting stat that I find to be fascinating, a fascinating case study. They're 5-0. When they've ran for 100 yards. Just 100 yards. They're 5-0. And they're 0-3 in the games where they haven't ran for 100 yards. And in those games, they ran for 58, 65, and 66. So if you can limit them from running the football and make them one-dimensional, teams have had a whole lot of success against that. And I think that's probably why they started implementing more Savion Williams in the run game. I think it was very smart of them to do that, try to manufacture some sort of rushing game, get another blocker on the field, try to find a way to just make yourself not as one-dimensional as they have been. Cam Cook has been their lead rusher, but it seems like they've kind of turned more towards Jeremy Payne a little bit recently, trying to get him involved a little bit more. And then you mentioned their pass catchers. Savion Williams on that list, but Jack Besh has been terrific for them this year. The former LSU receiver who Baylor actually recruited pretty heavily out of the transfer portal. He's in his second year at TCU. He's got 825 yards and 7 touchdowns. They also have Eric McAllister, who you mentioned, and then J.P. Richardson, who transferred from Oklahoma State, also has 400 yards receiving. So 4 terrific receiving options. Also Drake Dabney, who hasn't really been all that involved, but those 4 receivers, very, very good players and guys that, can absolutely exploit Baylor down the field and honestly also make guys miss in the open field.
Anything real quick on their defense, because we need to get some questions here, but they were a bad defense to start the season, especially against the run, if I remember correctly, and they've gotten better the last few games. They're starting to see progress and them kind of figuring some things out on that side of the ball. I mean, they just gave up 34 to Texas Tech. They gave up a bunch of points earlier this year to SMU, but it does seem like the later in the year they're starting to, at least get better, but they're not a dominant unit by any stretch.
Right. I think this is kind of what I'm talking about, though. You look at it and go, well, they gave up only 68 yards rushing to Utah, but we know what Utah's offense has been now. So is that really them improving drastically? This week, they only gave up 180 on 50 carries to Tech. So that was actually a relatively encouraging performance given how many carries they saw. But Houston ran for 207 yards, Kansas 167, SMU 238, and Central Florida 289. So they have gotten hit in the run game a lot, and I believe they're third to last in the Big 12 in run defense as well. Pass defense is a lot better, though. They do a good job back there. They have a lot of veterans kind of in their secondary, including Bud Clark, who is probably their best defense player, at least in my eyes. They have a few other guys that are really good, but lots of experience in the secondary. They can make life a little bit hard back there, so you have to be able to run the football and then set up your passing game and really just convert on the explosive plays, I think is going to be really important, because I don't know if we're going to see Sawyer completing like 80% of his passes. I think it's going to be more so in that 60% range. So when you do get those opportunities, can you take advantage of those?
All right, let's get in the mailbag, and we can answer some stuff about TCU along with that. And I think we're giving you a pretty general reaction to TCU, though. They are a dangerous team. They definitely have some flaws they've shown, and I think they're two pretty similar teams, not necessarily stylistically all the way, but just in terms of the Big 12, like, they're all together, basically, and there's maybe a couple teams that are a slight step above, but TCU and Baylor are pretty much right here, as most teams in the Big 12 are at this stage. So this is a big one for bowl eligibility for both sides, a big one just for who can maybe finish a little higher in the standings and go on a little bit of a run to close out the year. CJ in Texan starts us off and says, TCU seem to get their offense going in the second half against Tech. You see Baylor playing the clock game by limiting TCU's offensive possessions, or do you think this is a game where Sawyer needs to air it out and it becomes a race to 50 points?
Definitely do not want Sawyer to just have to be standing back there throwing it all over the place against TCU. I don't think he'll be a race to 50 points. I firmly believe that TCU I think their points in that last game was more them playing from behind and then taking advantage of Tech's defense. I mean, Baylor torched that Tech defense as well. I just think it took TCU a little while to get going. They had to get past their turnover problems that they suffered early on in the game. And then once they started turning that on, then they were able to complete passes and play free, but it was mainly because they were just playing from behind, in my opinion. So I think Baylor definitely needs to try to limit TCU's possessions. They need to be able to run the football, and then I think that run game will set up Sawyer to create some explosive plays in the pass game. But in general, I do think Baylor's going to have to win up front with their offensive line again, which they've done the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think TCU would like to get into a shootout. I think they'd like it to be like 56-50. That would actually be up more their alley than for Baylor, I think. Doc Crowell, big if, but if Baylor gets to 7 wins, would that mean Aranda takes a semblance of a step backwards from the defense, or do you think he needs to continue to be this locked in on D in order to continue the progress? I guess that question first.
Yeah, it was interesting in the press conference. Dave Aranda kind of mentioned that he hasn't really figured it out. The head coach and defense coordinator responsibilities, having both of them. But I don't know that he can. And I don't think he should. I think he needs to be as hands-on as possible with the defense, because while they aren't amazing still this year, I think you clearly have seen signs of growth from where they were a year ago. And I think as they get more talent in, I think you'll only take that defense to another level. So I think he needs to continue doing it for now.
Doc, I appreciate the question. Definitely understand where you're coming from. But for me right now, that's they need to get to 7 wins, before I start to even entertain that idea, honestly, because that's a great question. But they're at 4 wins right now, so let's get 3 more wins, and then we can have the conversation about what that might look like. Well, we see a lot of Peso versus TCU to let the pass rushers focus on that job all night.
Probably depends on the health of Garmin Randolph. He was kind of banged up in that game. We'll see if he plays. Didn't hear anything from Dave Aranda on it. I think we're going to see a ton of Steve Linton, though, and he's going to have to be on the field a lot, I think, in this game. He's going to be very important.
Useless Kim Degree, any chance y'all will have access to some of the key members of the 13-14 teams? If so, who are you most excited about speaking with? we already talked to Bryce Petty. We talked to Seth Russell last week. We're going to talk with a couple of other guys this week. I think I don't know if it's Spencer Drango. I don't know. There's a couple guys else that we're going to talk to on 365 Sports. But I guess Bryce would have been up there, and we've already talked to him. We talked to Ahmad a month ago. So a lot of the casting characters we've spoken with, but I talked to Phil Bennett, obviously, yesterday. But I think, getting Bryce on, and Seth, that's kind of the top of the list. And all the former stars aren't necessarily the best interviewees. So, Corey Coleman would be great. I don't know how great the interview would be, though. You know what I mean? Yeah. But, we got to talk to, a couple of them, and there will be a couple more on this week, and just looking forward to kind of revisiting all that. Sammy Grace Bear, no matter how good or bad TCU is, they seem to play at their best against us. Although their record's not great, they have playmakers, and I'm worried. What are we looking for on offense early in the game for us to exploit that gives you confidence we can actually win, or vice versa? What on defense are you looking for us to win control?
So offense, running the football. Can you run the football, establish the line of scrimmage early on? I think that's going to be very important to kind of getting this offense flowing early. On defense, I think it's just about limiting explosive plays. TCU is going to move the football. I really don't think Baylor's holding them to, 14 points. Like I do think they're going to move the ball. So can you limit the explosives and force them to have these 10-play drives and forcing Josh Hoover to be pretty perfect on those drives? I think it is really kind of what Baylor needs to do in this game.
Injuries have plagued us, but not as bad as some years. Seems like most players who were out at the beginning are back and only a couple of starters are out. One person I was expecting back and hoping would be a contributor is Bet, but have not seen him any updates. Thanks for all you do. Thanks, Sammy.
I don't think Bet is playing this year. We've kind of alluded to that early on in the season, but we haven't seen anything else on him. So my guess is he will probably redshirt after playing his freshman year.
Golden Green, is it time to see if Tayshawn Wilson can help cover the slot? Carl Williams is going to have his hands full again this week without Simpkins available.
I think you got to play Carl as much as possible. Carl struggled in the last game against Brennan Presley. TCU doesn't have a Brennan Presley, but they have a lot of good receivers that can beat you over the middle of the field, and I think Carl's going to need to be out there. Maybe you could play Tayshawn, but I don't know if I would put him out there for more than just a few snaps to give Carl rest, but that's about it. I think, and hopefully they get Simpkins back this week. That would be really, I think, helpful.
Yeah, no idea on that front as far as the health goes as of Tuesday mid-morning.
Yeah, it seemed like he was close last week. That's what Dave Aranda said at least, but he didn't play, obviously, so we'll see on that.
Do you think Drake Dabney is from Wyatt Smith? Do you think Drake Dabney regrets leaving? I don't think so, just because I understand from a statistical point of view, if you would think that way. He has not seen the end zone. He's got 13 catches, though. That's a lot of catches. 13 catches, 100 yards. So that's like a couple catches a game, which I don't think – like last year he got a heavy dose because he was like all they had at times, it felt like.
Different scheme, too.
Yeah, but a tight end heavy scheme. Whereas, like, you went to a Browse offense, which as a tight end, like, you're never going to have, like, gaudy numbers, really.
Well, the thing is that Jared Wiley did last year, but he's an NFL guy. I don't know if Dabney is. And I think from the Baylor point of view, I would much rather have Michael Trigg in this offense.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, like, the typical Baylor offenses, your Jordan Ivars, and those guys never really had, like, but, Jared Wiley did. He's also a pretty special athlete. Not to say Drake's not, but I just think Wiley always proved to be a pretty good playmaker. And Dabney's always been kind of, up and down. But, as a player, I don't know. He's got 13 catches. They're 5-3. And you know what? I think as much as we probably look at, like, statistics, he's just maybe loving living in Fort Worth and going to school there, and it's not about, like, having touchdowns and all of that. Like, so for all I know, he's probably happy. And
I think it worked out for both sides because I think Baylor got better at the position.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from, though. Yeah. But, I don't know. Not knowing personally, like, he may be loving it and not all that worried about not having a touchdown at this point or whatever. A handful of recruiting battles. And, I think, like you said, it worked out best for both parties. A handful of recruiting battles have been between conference teams. Do you think we will start seeing some potential flips if we keep winning?
If they keep winning, they could, get potential flips from a multitude of places. I don't think it's necessarily the teams that they're playing against, though. Maybe, and there's a few kind of battles that are out there, but it's more so, between them and other schools when you look at, like, SMU or Nebraska, for instance.
New Jersey, I'm assuming Papa Bear, NJ Papa Bear, New Japan maybe. Shout out wrestling fans. Why is our secondary Swiss cheese? We couldn't take one wide receiver away this past game.
Yeah, but on the flip side, they took away all the other receivers to an extent. They did pretty good against, Owens and Stribling. But, yeah, Presley torched them. Some of this is just you went into this game, I think, deciding that you were going to force Alan Bowman to beat you, and you weren't going to allow their run game to beat you. And so, they had some nice throws, some nice wide open throws as well. But I think as you saw the game kind of get later and later, Baylor was able to limit that a little bit. They finally forced a turnover by Bowman. They limited them to just 28 points. And that required a fake punt and then a 3rd and 5 that went for a touchdown pretty inexplicably. And honestly, a big part of that is because Lorando Johnson got hurt and wasn't out there for that specific play. So yeah, I mean, I think there's things that you can look at and say, man, they need to get better. But I also think in general, that's been who this Baylor defense is. They've been a lot better up front than they have on the back end.
Berg 09, which positions do you think are key for this game on both the offensive and defensive side?
Safety on defense is going to be really crucial because you need to limit the explosive plays. You also got to be able to get off the field on third down. And so corner too, but I look at safety as kind of the position that I'm really looking at, and that includes star. On offense, I really think running the football, the offensive line. I think if Baylor's offensive line wins this game up front against TCU defensive line, then I think Baylor's going to be in a great spot to win this game.
Also ask about which player do you see having a big game or needing to have a big game?
That's a good question. I think Steve Linton on defense, if he can create some pressure, that could really change this game and force Hoover to throw some interceptions or at least have some turnover-worthy plays. Offensively, I think it's kind of a mixture. You look at the offensive line that I've mentioned a few times, but I think the connection between Sawyer Robertson and Ashton Hawkins is continuing to grow. And I think those two guys specifically are going to have a pretty big game. That doesn't mean Ashton needs to lead receivers. We've seen that switch kind of every week yardage-wise, but Ashton has been a guy that he's looked at and trusted in key situations of games.
All right, last few here. Okie Bear fan, how has TCU fared against mobile quarterbacks? Should that add any advantage in this matchup?
They've been okay, but I think in general, like you look at the Houston game, for instance, they gave up quite a bit of rushing yards to Chris. You look at Central Florida, gave up some to KJ, SMU as well. So there have been times, so I think you can point to it, but not as much as you could with Oklahoma State, where they were just giving up 60-yard rushing games to quarterbacks at an alarming rate. It's not quite that level for TCU, but I do think there will be some opportunities for Sawyer to run a little bit.
Bear Rate 23, if you could add one player on each side of the ball from the 13 and 14 teams that are visiting to this roster, who would it be and why?
Ooh, gosh. Okay, I'll add...
I don't like doing this because I deal in reality.
I know.
But I know it's from the fantasy book, but...
Yeah, I think I would go with Corey Coleman just because I really enjoyed watching Corey. I could go Spencer Drango as well.
I was going to say Spencer Drango would probably be a pretty good choice for this team, but Corey Coleman wouldn't be bad either.
Corey with Sawyer would be fun. Defensively, if they had Andrew Billings, they would have the best defensive line in the Big 12. And so that would be huge for them. Yeah, I know that's still their strength, but he would just be a difference maker.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I think that those two are pretty obvious choices on the offensive side. Defensive, though, yeah, Andrew Billings would be hard to pass up. I'm trying to think of anybody else.
Xavier Howard.
That's somebody I did think of for sure. He would be a good choice. What about at linebacker?
Yeah, it's like, would you replace Matt Jones with the Bryce Hager?
Yeah,
that would be.
You might, yeah.
Eddie Lackey.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good choices, but yeah, I think if you were to go, what'd you say, Corey Coleman or who?
Corey Coleman and Andrew Billings.
No, who else you say on offense besides Corey Coleman?
Oh, you said
Drango. Yeah, Drango.
And obviously Petty would be. I know Sawyer's been great.
Yeah, I don't think you're really worried. Yeah, but is Bryce mobile enough behind this offensive line? Probably not. True. So he's not breaking off that long run. He did joke because the players have been asked to run the line or invited to run the Baylor line. I asked him yesterday if he was going to run, and he said no, that he had already tripped and fallen once before in front of Baylor fans and didn't want to do it again. So a nice shout-out to the Oklahoma State game a few years back. So he will not be running the Baylor line. He will be there, though. So, he'd be good on any team, but I don't think you're worried about quarterbacks. So, yeah, those three names we mentioned would all be pretty stellar additions to this roster. Billy 21, is there ever to be a Bear depth chart? If not, okay, what does that mean? Do you have any idea?
No idea.
All right. Dr. Pierce, MPH, we got sliced and diced by OSU's Presley across the middle. At times we had linebackers trying to cover him. Although TCU doesn't have Presley, do you think they will try something similar? What can Baylor do better in these instances?
Well, I think they're going to be able to drop more guys into coverage because they're not going to worry about the run game as much from TCU like they had to with Oklahoma State. So I think you'll see a little bit more than that. I think you'll see them try to create some pressure on Josh Hoover as well. They do not have a Presley, but they have 4 guys that really are explosive and really good. They'll attack you across the middle of the field with J.P. Richardson. They'll attack you down the field with Besh, and Savion gives them that option to kind of break tackles in the open field and give you some yak. So lots of different options, but it won't be funneled to one guy this week. So Baylor's going to have to do a good job dropping more guys into coverage and then trying to create pressure with blitzes.
And finally here, CJ and Texan, how's TCU's pass defense relative to Baylor's pass offense?
It's much better than what Baylor has faced the last 2 weeks. So they're going to be tested.
Their strength on defense is definitely their secondary.
Yeah, they're going to test Baylor for sure. But if Baylor can run the football and make them just really have to respect that run game, then I do think you could see them be able to take some advantage to it. I will say this, though. When you look at who they've played so far this year, they have not faced very good quarterbacks on this schedule. And Texas Tech threw for 344 yards last week. So I'm curious or threw for 258 yards last week. So I'm curious if it's more so they just haven't played any good quarterbacks or if they truly are really good in the secondary. I think that's going to get tested on Saturday.
All right, that's the mailbag. Thanks to everybody who was a part of that and sending any questions this week. Got to all of them, I do believe. So thank you, and hopefully you got what you were looking for there, and we will hear from you again. But that does leave us with a few minutes to go. We got the blackout this weekend, which is the first time in a long time they've officially done that. We've got the honoring of the 2013 and 14 teams. There's a lot of pageantry involved with this game. On the recruiting front, is there anything to know? Are they making a big deal out of this one? What's kind of the vibes with winning a couple of games? I'm seeing Kamarian Morgan. He's talking on Twitter, and Taz Williams, and these guys seem to be enjoying the wins, but just kind of where do they find themselves now as we sort of reset for this final month of the season?
Right now, they're in a good place. I mean, the whole goal here is, make a bowl game, try to maintain some cohesiveness with the coaching staff, maintain that recruiting momentum that they gained during the offseason. And I think, truthfully, the recruits have been very honest and open with the fact that they think Baylor's improved a lot from a year ago. And I think that's been pretty obvious, but they've been steadfast even when Baylor was 2-4 was saying that. And I think you're seeing kind of this building momentum from the football team and also building momentum from the commits. I think they're really excited by what they're seeing from Baylor right now, and I think that's just going to continue to improve this class. And as we move forward, October, November, and then into December, where the early signing day is, I think it's going to be very interesting to see if Baylor can start, potentially going back to some guys and trying to flip some guys late in the process once they've kind of established themselves as a bowl team and established to the point where it's like, oh, everyone knows the staff will be back next year. I think that's a crucial point in trying to finish out this class and gain that momentum towards the end. But nothing huge here. I will say they will have a lot of visitors on Saturday. They had quite a few against Oklahoma State as well. So they are making a big deal of it. But as far as anything imminent at the moment, not so much, even though if you go to Sikkim 365 Premium side, I will have some notes this week. There are some guys that Baylor's working on trying to flip. If you want news on that, be sure to check that out. I'll also have the list of visitors up probably on Thursday this week.
All right, so there's a lot going on the recruiting front, and these last couple of weeks have definitely been beneficial and just sort of keeping that all together, because had you lost these last couple of weeks and you were looking at like 2-6, then all of a sudden the whole thing starts to fall apart probably. But the wins come in at the right time and have put them in a position to now have this big game this weekend, not for national purposes, but certainly for conference and regional purposes and statewide purposes. This is a big game. Historical purposes, this is a big game, and a big game for Aranda. And if they could win 3 in a row, man, that'd be a really big deal. That'd be a really big deal, not just because it hasn't happened in a couple years, but just that on top of just sort of where they find themselves. It would be massive to go from 2-4 to 5-4 and then get a break and then your final 3 games, because there is a bye week on the other side of this game right here. So see if they can close strong, but should be a really great atmosphere. There's a lot of talk about the teams coming back and all of that. I hope that the players get the focus they deserve this weekend, and they're honored properly, and there's a great crowd. So, yeah, I'm hopeful for all those things. I'm expecting all those things, and we'll actually see on Saturday whether that all comes to fruition, but I don't see why it shouldn't. So should be a lot of fun at McLean on Saturday. But that leaves us now with a handful of games in the Big 12. I guess just to close it out with this, with just a few thoughts on an exact handful of games. 5 games in the Big 12 this weekend. 6 teams have the open week as we start to get into the final stretch here. Texas Tech, who we talked about, saw them a couple weeks ago, saw them lose to TCU. So these last 2 games have actually played this Baylor-TCU matchup and gone 0-2. They lost Baron Morton to injury. He's back this week, it looks like, although Will Hammond did get some time in relief and will probably have some time carved out for him. Baron Morton's the starter, but Will Hammond's probably going to get some looks here and there based on what Joey McGuire has said. But they're reeling, and they now go to Iowa State, who is number 11 in the country, 2:30 on ESPN. Iowa State 14.5-point favorites in this one.
I like Iowa State to win this game. I don't think it's going to be particularly close, and I think Tech might lose 2 in a row here and really be kind of sweating it out to make a bowl game at the end. Or 3 in a row, yeah. And, 2 more in a row is what I mean. I think they might lose to Colorado next week as well. And so they're kind of in an interesting situation after starting the season so strong against a very weak schedule. Now it turns over. I think they're going to lose the names probably by 14.
Yeah, I mean, they just need 1 win in their last 4, so that seems doable, especially there at the end with Oklahoma State, West Virginia, possibly, but possibly not. I mean, who the heck knows? We'll see. They've lost a couple in a row, though, and they're expected to lose this game for certain on Saturday. If they didn't, that'd be a really big win for them, but I'm not banking on it, so yeah, I'll take Iowa State. Kansas State, number 17 team in the country at Houston, who got a huge win last week over an embarrassingly bad Utah program at the moment, who deserves all of their negative talk because they, brought it all upon themselves this offseason, quite frankly. So anyways, Houston with a big win. They're at home against K-State, 2:30 on Fox. They are 13.5-point underdogs.
Yeah, give me K-State here. I think Houston comes back to the pack after winning last week. I think K-State's just a better team, and K-State, I think, got a wake-up call against Kansas this past week.
It's also just what Houston does. They beat Rice. They lost 2 in a row. They beat TCU. They lost to Kansas. They beat Utah. They probably go and lose to Kansas State. But they're getting a couple wins here and there that just make the otherwise rebuild year a little bit of fun. So good for them. But yeah, definitely taking K-State here. So like last week I said Utah-Houston was the ugliest battle stylistically you could put together on paper. This week I think the Big 12's found the new one. Arizona at UCF. 2 teams who are just barely keeping their heads above water, maybe dipping back and forth under the surface. They're just kind of straddling the line between being bad and average and maybe a flash of good here and there, but wholly underwhelming, both of these teams. UCF's at home, 2:30 on FS1, and they are 6.5-point favorites just after firing their defensive coordinator. Gus Malzahn's handed over offensive play caller duties. They don't have a clue what they're doing at quarterback, it feels like, but they are favorites against an Arizona team that is basically 2 guys and a bunch of injuries on defense and a bunch of what-ifs.
Right. I mean, both these teams are really bad. I would take Arizona to cover this spread, though. I mean, 6.5 for almost a full touchdown seems like way too much for UCF the way they've been playing. UCF, I think they'll squeak this game out, but I think it'll be really close. So I like Arizona to cover that, though.
Yeah, I think I would take UCF just head up to win this one at home. But who the heck? Both these teams are just so sporadic. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see just kind of how that one goes. But I don't think there's going to be much interest beyond Big 12 circles for that one. Arizona State at Oklahoma State, 6 p.m. FS1. Arizona State road team 3-point favorites heading into what used to be the fortress that was T. Boone Pickens Stadium. Not the case these days, as Oklahoma State looking to win their first Big 12 game as they enter their 6th Big 12 game of the year. That's pretty crazy, especially where they started off.
Yeah, give me Oklahoma State to win this game. I think they're going to – this isn't a get-right spot, but I think they're going to find a way to win this one. I expect it to be high-scoring. Cam Scadaboo's probably going to have 200 yards rushing, but I think Alan Bowman and Brennan Presley in this passing attack will do enough for them to squeak out a win, especially at home.
Looks like Arizona State will have Sam Levitt back at quarterback, so that's definitely a feather in their cap that they did not have necessarily for sure going into this game, but now that he's back, that's good news. So that does make it a little bit more interesting, and it's probably why ASU is favored. I think I'd still take Oklahoma State here, and if they don't win this weekend, then, I mean, my gosh. So, yeah, I think I'd take the Pokes, but don't feel super confident in that. So that'll be on Saturday night, but also on Saturday night, 7 p.m., it's the late game for the Big 12. No 10 o'clock kickoffs this week or, games lasting until 2 a.m. But Baylor TCU, the late game, 7 o'clock, Baylor 3-point favorites at home.
I mean, there's just so much that's going into this game from the Baylor side, honoring the 2013, 2014 teams, the blackout game that Baylor hasn't had since 2016, an official blackout game. And so there just feels like there's so much momentum going into this. And so if Baylor came out and laid an egg, I would be completely surprised by that. I just don't see that happening. I think this matchup is good enough for Baylor to take advantage of it. I think TCU could come in here and be a little shell-shocked and turn the ball over some and really give Baylor an opportunity to extend a lead. I just think in general, this feels like the moment that Baylor's been waiting for all year to kind of put it all together. I know they did against Tech, but I mean a home game where they put it all together. They have all these fans there, all this excitement. Give me Baylor, and I think Baylor's going to win this game by 2 scores. I think they're going to win it 38-24 or 41-27, something in that area.
Yeah, I said last year, and I've said at various points, I would not pick Baylor against TCU to save my life, but I actually am going to because I think that they should win this game. I think that it's pretty even. I think the fact you got a little bit of momentum and you kind of found your identity a little bit, although that's still a work in progress. But I just like the way that they're playing. I think the time is now to win this game, and with all the pageantry, that should just be like an extra jolts to your efforts. So, yeah, give me the atmosphere and the home field and the hot hand, if you will, and give me the Bears here in, I don't know about 2 scores, but I do think it won't be a down to the wire. I do think that you can at least enjoy the last couple of minutes, if that makes sense. You're not like, oh my gosh, this is the scramble drill to kick a field goal to win the game or lose the game. I think that they can breathe easy at the end, but I do think it will be ultra competitive as TCU always is versus Baylor. And them winning would not surprise. How could it surprise you? They've won most of these games over the last decade. But I for some reason I'm feeling Baylor here with what we've seen as of late. So yeah, give me the Bears. I'll have an official score prediction on Friday over on the website along with the rest of the staff. But I am going to take Baylor as it stands here on Tuesday afternoon. So anything before we go?
No, just be sure to check out Sikkim 365 Premium site. All kinds of great content that we're continuing to push out as basketball season approaches as well. So be sure to check that out.
Yeah, a lot of hoops getting underway. So if you are a hoop head, then this is your time of year getting started up. But if you're a football fan, this is obviously the thick of things. And if you're a fan of both sports when it comes to the Bears, then this is really a great time to jump on the forums, jump on the website, and be a part of all the news, notes, stories, etc. that come with being a member of Sikkim365.com or of this YouTube channel. So please hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And, we will be back next Tuesday with a full recap of this TCU game. We'll have basketball to talk about as well with the big Gonzaga matchup on Monday night. And we'll recap that to some extent and have an open week. So we'll have a little bit more time, not have a game to talk about for football next week. But are we talking about a 3-game win streak? Are we talking about them being 1 win away from a bowl game? Or are we talking about another loss to TCU? That's what we'll find out on Saturday and be talking about next Tuesday. But until next time, we appreciate you listening and watching. For Garrett Ross and Grayson Grundhoefer and Jack McKenzie, I'm Craig Smoak, and this has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.